Alright, so I'm going to be showing a material breakdown for how to do the world space texture variation that I showed off in an overview video earlier. And it's actually incredibly simple. What I was showing with the wall there is just these nodes right here. So this is only going to take a bit, but I want to go through this pretty thoroughly and show what each of these is actually doing so you understand it all. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so the most important part of this material by far is the world space noise mask. And that is easy enough. We just need a noise node and a world position node. If we put that in there. And the noise, you don't have to use the same settings I did, but I switched it over to fast gradient with a scale of, I believe, 0.02. Yeah, and everything else is the same. So just fast gradient scale of 0.02. And this will obviously adjust kind of how big these noise patterns here are. If I change this to 1, you can see that now it's incredibly tiny. If I go 0.01, they get bigger. 0.02. I kind of like that size, but you can play around with it. And then I basically, and this is optional, but I just ran this through a multiply with a scalar value. And what this is basically going to do, I called it hardness because this is going to take any of the noise spots and control kind of how strong they are. And that's where this clamp node, but you can use a saturate node instead of clamp for this purpose. Does basically the same thing for what we want. We want to clamp it so the value is between 1 and 0. We don't need any super overvalued noise. We just want to be multiplying the noise texture to increase the sharpness, to bring the lower parts of the gradient up a bit and control it. So I'm going to put this to 5, like the other one. And that is pretty much this little bit right here. This is all you need to get your noise mask going. And then beyond that we have, just simple stuff, the base texture. And so we want to lerp. Yes, we want the math version of lerp. And we're going to want to be lerping between our base texture, which is the undamaged wall, which I can show you if I drag this all the way over to base color. You can see like the normal and stuff is still coming through, but this is what the texture looks like without any of the other stuff being blended into it. Just gonna put that back for now. Is that not? That's not what I had plugged in. Oh yeah, it's from that lerp. Yeah, I know how my material works. And then we have this texture here. I'm going to show you. This is literally just, and this is not the most optimal way. This is a bunch of the same thing repeating over and over again. This section here could definitely be optimized later, but for now I'm just leaving it simple. It works. And the scale of kind of the damage I want is good with it tiling over and over in the texture. But that is more or less beside the point. Now we want to take our mask and use that as the alpha. Then we just take the texture for the damage and plug that in here. And this will mess up with some of the other variations I'm doing, but if I plug this into base color, you see the problem now is I'm not masking out any of the other parts of the material. So that's what all this is for. But you can see we are getting the damage blending through. And if you had, say, a very simple texture where the only thing on the texture material was this white plaster for the wall, you wouldn't need a mask. All you need is your world space noise to lerp between your base texture and the damage you want to blend through. So, hope that makes sense and you can see how incredibly powerful and really simple this is. I'm going to go over the masks and how that all works here in a bit. Alright, well, now that we've looked at the noise position and how we can use that to blend in with our damage texture, one of the neater pieces of this material too is the masking. And with the masking, we can make sure we're only applying the damage to the areas we want. It also lets us do other things like pan the wood grain around, so you don't end up with beams that all look the same. They'll all have different wood grains. And we can apply like noise-based mesh deformation to try to break up some of the straight lines and the repetitiveness of our model. So we want to be able to mask out like the three real areas of this mesh: the wattle and daub wall, the wood, and the thatch. And to do that, in Substance Painter, what I've done quite simply is I've taken the opacity channel and, I've masked out the wattle and daub area in Painter, and I've assigned them an opacity of 0.5. And then the planks, I've assigned them an opacity of 1. And the thatch, I want to say, has an opacity of 0. Yeah. And what that allows me to do here inside of Unreal is I can, and this is like a little crazy looking maybe, but what I'm doing is taking the alpha from our base color, and to separate the masks, what I'm doing is I'm subtracting 0.9 from it. So this will basically give us the wood, because the wood has a value of 1. The other thing has a value of 0.5. So I take 0.9 away, and then I multiply that to bump that mask value back up. Then I clamp it. And I do a similar thing here. Once I've done that, and I have all this, I'm going to come in here, take this, and I subtract the mask that I just got for the wood from this. And then I multiply it again and reclamp it. And that is what gives me the plaster part of our mask. So this is a really funky way of taking the alpha channel and splitting it into 3 distinct masks: the unmasked area and our wood and wall mask. You can see this clamp here is just going into this multiply to make sure it's pumped up as high as it can be, because we want to make sure we nuke everything when we subtract from here. And then we take that value and multiply what's left, because what's left should be our 0.5 mask, but we want that to be a value of 1, so then we clamp it. Then we run this back into our multiply, which we combine with our noise mask. So we're masking out the noise to only affect that area, and then we lerp. So if we look at this, and all we very simply have to do is take this. So we need to come to our saturate and multiply. And then we can come over here and take the wall mask we have created, plug that into the multiply. And now this lerp should, if we, I forget, yeah, this goes into the alpha. Now we should, yep, now it's just that part of the wall. And that is quite simply how this mask works. It's very simple. Since I'm not using the alpha channel for anything, it doesn't require any additional textures or anything. It's a very lightweight and simple method for taking one texture and doing different fancy little techniques like this to it. Alright, so now I want to go over the wood grain panning part of this material. And that is very simple. We're taking our actor position and we're dividing it by what I call the change threshold. This is basically going to make it pan faster or slower. And this is actually rather redundant. I'm not sure why. I have basically what are two different methods of masking out the Z channel here, using a component mask, but also multiplying this by a vector of 1, 1, and 0. So you could do this, but I want to say most people are just going to go for that method and not this. This is what happens when you do stuff late at night. So you mask this out, because we don't want the Z, because we're using UVs. There's no Z in UVs. So we take that, we take our text chord, and we add the two, because we're panning it. We don't want to multiply these. And then, this is just quite simply a tileable wood texture that we are then taking, and we're lerping that with our wood mask. So we're lerping between what we just made, our plaster wall here. Then we take our wood mask and we add this in. And once we do that, we will get a wood grain that moves. And I don't know of a way to move it in the viewport here. And my computer is starting to lag quite a bit. Please get over it. And so I want to show off the wood grain changing real quick. So like you see, like let's look at that knot there. That's a good, you see how it stays? As we pan over, it goes away. And what that allows us to do is have really high fidelity wooden beams without having them look like the same thing over and over again. Because these are all the same material, same texture, same everything. The only reason these look different and this doesn't look completely terrible and repetitive is because of what we're doing in the material here. We are panning the wood texture based on our actor position in world space. We are applying damage, and you can apply a lot of things, moss, dirt, color variation. You know, it doesn't have to be this. Opacity, you could apply anything with this noise. And what that's going to do is let you have the same texture and mesh, instance those, but get different results for each one based on their position. And that is an incredibly powerful and well-optimized technique. It is exactly what you're going to be needing to do in any kind of modern AAA game. And there's one other thing I want to show. And computer's lagging again. But it is the tessellation and the displacement of the mesh. So I'm going to show that off here in a bit. Alright, so to showcase the tessellation and displacement, I actually had to go back into Unreal Engine 4 because Unreal Engine 5 tessellation is actually deprecated and removed as of right now. So this literally doesn't work in this material. I can't do this. They're replacing tessellation with nanite, and so if you want to do something like this going forward, you will have to come up with some kind of way of doing that within nanite. So it is what it is. That's something for me to figure out and play with. For now, I'm just going to show off what the core of the technique is and what I have working currently, which is a tessellation-based approach to dynamic world position-based mesh displacement, as I will call it. If I can just get over here. So what I have here in this material is quite simply just a very basic tessellation setup. We're taking the world position of the object, the camera position, we subtract them, we get the length, we divide that by our fade distance, we clamp it, then we lerp between 0, our minimum tessellation value, and 20, our maximum value. And then we plug that into our tessellation multiplier. And what that's going to do is tessellate it more or less based on the camera distance. Because we don't want to tessellate all the meshes if we're way out here, right? So that's what all this is about. If you didn't want to do the camera scaling, you could just plug this in to the tessellation multiplier. But all this stuff is certainly advised. And then the world displacement is super simple. You don't even need to use a different noise node. I am here. But you could use the same one we're using up here for the masks. And you just take the absolute world position, put that into the noise. This currently isn't doing anything. This is just for control, basically. We can individually control and multiply the X, Y, and Z of our 3D noise. So you see I turned off the X and Y for that board there. Not sure you'll really notice the Y. Then I turn that on. And yeah. So now we have some deformation going on. And that goes into world displacement. And what this does is it's quite simply a easy procedural dynamic way of breaking up the repetitiveness of your boards, your angles. It'll make everything look a little different, a little messy, a little less, perfect straight lines everywhere CG. And it won't look perfect, but it looks way better, especially from a distance to a player that's just passing by, than a bunch of repetitive straight lines that all look the same everywhere. So this is a very useful technique if you want to try to get the most out of your reusable assets. But alright, so I hope that explains everything and you found that helpful. It's a very good technique to know if you're doing anything like this. Any kind of 3D environment art, really. It comes in incredibly useful being able to use world space, 3D noise, and such to dynamically change textures and meshes, and using something as simple as the alpha channel to create different masks in your textures. That's pretty useful too. That's a good takeaway. And with these few simple techniques, you can do a lot of very powerful and useful things when you're designing 3D environment props and assets. So, I hope this was helpful. Have a nice day.